This week on the Powell Not Found podcast, we're talking Unfrosted, the new Jerry Seinfeld movie, Aaron Judge getting ejected, some weird baseball fans, and some weird baseball plays coming up on the next episode of the Powell Not Found podcast. Let's hit it. Let's go.
I'm gonna tell you a story about a girl who loves gin. A national pandemic seized her birthday celebration. Although she knew it was coming, we tried not to tell her. She brewed some Irish breakfast tea. She knew her birthday was getting corona.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Powell Not Found podcast show for the week of Sunday, May 5th, in the year of our Lord 2024. Hopefully everyone is doing well. Weather has been kind of crummy this weekend, so it's been a little bit of staying inside. But man, what a busy week it has been. Hockey games, baseball games for me, trying to get out, enjoying the good weather, the like 90-degree weather that we were experiencing for a quick second, and then getting trapped inside in a horrible rainy weekend day. So it was all kind of flipped, but busy things happening this week, starting off with seeing the Capitals and the Rangers in a winner-go-home game for the Capitals, which unfortunately they did lose, so they got swept by the Rangers. But the environment inside that arena was crazy. I mean, I feel like every single time I go to a Caps game in a playoff environment, it is wild. And when they win and when they score, man, do you hear the fans come out. When they don't play well, when they are kind of getting roughed up by the opponent, the stadium goes a little silent. It's a little disheartening. But man, did they play with? They kind of fought back. They made it interesting. It was definitely went all the way to the third period. I think tied 1-1, and unfortunately they fell. But they battled. They battled hard, and I had a great time. Great time at the game. It was really fun. I'm not a big hockey person. I know I'm a Yankees fan. I'm not a Rangers fan by any stretch of the means. So I kind of follow the team that my friends follow at this point, which is the Capitals. And, for a team that had no expectation of getting to the playoffs, they certainly kind of battled and they made it interesting. And even in a game where their backs were up against the wall, you felt like, I don't know, maybe they can pull this off, A 3-0 deficit is kind of nothing in hockey that I'm learning. That previously, before, I thought that 3-0 was like only accomplished. Comeback from 3-0 had only been accomplished by the Red Sox. Turns out that was only accomplished by the Red Sox in Major League Baseball, not in other sports. And hockey, it's happened like 4 or 5 times. So it's like quite common to just get on a hot streak and boom, all of a sudden you're up 4-3. But game was good. They ended up losing. I feel like the final score was like 3-1. I can't remember exactly what it was. I just know it was or 3-2, 4-2, whatever it was. At some point it was out of sight and it was gone. Surrounded by some very passionate Rangers fans, which upon a week of reflection now is making me think that the amount of passion that they brought to a visiting arena was almost at the detriment of watching the game in peace, right? And let me explain what I mean by that. So, for years growing up, I lived in Boston territory, and I was a Yankees fan. And I was originally actually a Yankees and Red Sox fan when I was younger. I would wear Nomar shirts and Derek Jeter shirts or whatever and support both teams. I didn't care about the rivalry when I was 6, But whenever I would go to a visiting ballpark, my thought, and I think this is the overwhelming thought about when you visit a ballpark, is that you're not going to go there to instigate anything, right? You're not going to try to if you're that kind of fan and you're trying to pick fights with people for whooping and hollering and booing and yelling and whatever. I think you as the fan, that kind of fan stinks, and to sit next to. And I say that as a baseball person, and baseball has a long history of jeering from the crowd, telling the ump that he stinks. And I think everybody knows that when they go to a baseball game, that kind of stuff is going to be expected, right? In fact, one of my favorite accounts to follow on Instagram is an account that basically does like positive chirps to Giants players and negative chirps, but they're funny, right? I think that's the difference, right? If you're not hurting anybody, if you're just joking, if it's clearly that it's a joke, it's fine. When I went to the game, I was sitting next to people that would not shut up. I mean, would not shut up about the other players, about wanting the other players to get hurt. It was just like, oh my God. It was obnoxious to the point of, like, get a life. Like, this is a game. We all paid to be here. If my ticket had said going to be next to obnoxious Rangers fan yelling obscenities for 60 minutes, I would have rethought my purchase to a playoff game at Capital One, right? But you do your best to ignore those situations, right? Because you don't want those situations to escalate in any way. But it brings back memories of not only just like, oh my God, can we all act like emotionally mature people here that bought tickets with money that hopefully we earned, and just watch the game. Just watch the game. But unfortunately, I was sitting next to two people, and they were just complete, immature people, just yelling and hollering and then attacking other people for yelling. And I'm telling you right here, right now, right, that this kind of behavior is not fun to be next to. It makes people nervous. And for anybody saying that that's just going to a sports game, I say, no, it isn't. I've been in enough ballparks, and this would happen in Fenway. This would happen in Yankee Stadium. This would happen in Camden Yards. There's no fan base that's going to sit here and say, well, we don't have those types of fans. Everyone has, bad fans that go to a ballpark and they drink too much and they start kind of like, acting like, they're defending their passion like they're soccer hooligans. And I'm telling you that if you're one of those fans, reevaluate yourself, because you're making the experience bad for anyone else involved. When I was younger, I remember like distinctly sitting in Fenway Park and somebody was yelling at like a child for wearing a Yankees hat. And even the people who were rooting for the Red Sox at the time, luckily we were all kind of like sitting in a section where the Red Sox fans were like, okay, this is ridiculous, right? It's ridiculous to do it adult to adult, but to a child, like, you're ruining the experience, right? Those type of fans should be banned from the ballpark, right? If you say something, if you're swearing every 5 seconds, you should be thrown out of a ballpark and or an arena or anything like that. Security should really, really ramp up. Like, just because you bought tickets, just because you bought an overpriced hot dog, just because you sat there and bought a jersey from the team store does not give you the actual privilege to start swearing at players and abusing them in the stands just because you happen to want, like Seinfeld says, a piece of laundry to win a cup that they just essentially made up and they bought at Home Depot. I mean, does anybody get what my point is? My point is, I'm sick of seeing these people throw trash on the field like there's some sort of privilege to, okay, all of a sudden I can start acting like a hooligan because I bought a ticket, right? No. The same way, if you reach your hand, Major League Baseball will have no problem enforcing, if you reach your hand out and touch a ball in play, they will kick you out immediately. But somehow, if you're swearing in front of like children, or if you're acting like an idiot, if you're instigating fights, if you're yelling at the opponent like it's just over and over and over again. Somehow you're allowed to stay. You're rewarded for it, and you get labeled as passionate. I think that's bull. And frankly, I've seen a lot of it in sports and going to sports games. I think that you run that risk of going. It's like it's becoming like a comedy show. Like most people don't like going to a comedy show sitting in the first row because they don't want to be picked on or talked to. They just want to hear comedy, right? They don't want to be part of the show, right? So they sit in the back so they can avoid it, right? It's the only performing art where no one wants to sit in the front. The sporting arenas in the playoffs are starting to become that. A year ago, another example, I went to Citi Field and was watching a game, was fairly close to the front. I was lucky enough to get seats like that. And there was like two trust fund kids yelling at the ball boy, who, by the way, works for the Mets, right? And because he was wearing the opposite jersey, they were just yelling at him, calling him names because they wouldn't give him a precious ball that was put out of play, right? Again, those fans should have been kicked out. I'm fairly sure that people around them were actually complaining to security. Security said there was nothing they could do. I think that's bull because they're ruining the experience of going to a game. And the reason I'm bringing this up for so long, kind of beating a dead horse about how these fans, these entitled fans that like travel with the team, they go into somebody else's house and they make the experience bad for the home teams, is the reason you're starting to see that North Carolina, I think the Carolina Hurricanes, limited ticket sales to just local people so they wouldn't have these types of fans travel with the team and take up the whole house. And at first I was like, I don't know if you can do that, right? Let me see if I can get the article up here. At first I was like, I can't remember limits tickets to local fans. Let's see if that brings up. Here we go. The Athletic, excuse me. The Athletic has an article here that has this right here. Let me push so you guys can see this. This is from an article in May 2nd, so a couple days ago. Hurricanes restrict ticket sales to local fans for Ranger playoff series. And then it goes on to say ticket sales for Carolina home games in its second round series against the New York Rangers are being restricted to fans from North Carolina, South Carolina, and select parts of Virginia, according to a disclaimer on Ticketmaster. It's a repeat of the 2022 series between the teams when fans from outside those regions were delivered a similar notice. The Rangers won that series in 7 games. So this is from an article from Julian McKenzie from The Athletic. And again, if you don't have The Athletic, it's the New York Times sports section. It's fantastic. I think a lot of the articles are great in here. So go get a subscription for The Athletic and go read the rest of the article. But they're doing it because of these of the fans coming into their house and making it a New York, like a New York home game, right? And at first I'm like, I don't think you can do that, right? Can you restrict sales to an area? I know Ticketmaster is a complete mess. Bots are buying up tickets. But at first, now I'm like, yeah, after seeing what those bad, and again, let me clarify, bad Rangers fans, right? Not regular Rangers fans who watch the game with a modicum of decorum, right? They're doing this so that they can, one, give the opportunity to local people to watch the game, and so they don't get scooped by a whole bunch of fan bases that are bigger and bigger markets that travel well, that don't have anything else to do with their lives but go to an away game, right? But it preserves the place not becoming like an absolute horror show, and probably it avoids fights breaking out from people who are so passionate they can't keep it together, right? And I wouldn't even call that passion. I would just call it insanity. If you're going to a sports game looking to pick a fight, you're insane. You shouldn't be allowed into an arena. And so I experienced a little bit of that. Nothing came to blows, just to wrap up the rest of the story at the game. But I do, I guess something was happening like a couple rows in front of me and I didn't even notice it. But if you're one of those fans that takes it too seriously, right? I need you to look in the mirror and realize that you're not part of the team. And that if the Rangers or if the Capitals or let's say the baseball, if the Yankees, if the Red Sox, if they win the World Series or if they win the Stanley Cup, right? That nothing in your life as a fan changes. I need those unruly fans to realize that. A couple years ago, and this is the last thing I'll talk about some unruly fans, because I want to talk about something happy. I want to talk about something fun, and passionate. But I feel like I had to mention it because it was just like, are you serious? Right? A couple years ago, I think the Yankees won against the Guardians, or I think at the time the then Indians, right? And they walked off. Gleyber Torres hit a walk-off single, and the Yankees won the game. But previously in the game, one of the Indians, then now Guardians, then Indians, whatever, Cleveland, one of the Cleveland players started jawing with a fan that was getting unruly and calling him names. And again, unacceptable behavior, right? Gleyber Torres comes in the bottom of the 10th, bottom of the 11th, whatever it is, hits a single. And fans, and I, in quotes, fans start chucking garbage onto the field. Again, unacceptable behavior. All those fans should be basically told, you're never going to a game again if you were found on camera doing that. Again, this is not how you act at a sports event. Even Judge and Stanton had to come out and be like, no, cut it out, right? They went to the outfield to say, this is not acceptable behavior, right? This is giving New York fans, regular New York fans who go to the game, cheer on the thing, a bad name, right? And as a New York Yankees fan who sits there and watches the game, and I'll whoop and I'll sometimes sarcastically boo the ump. He's like, oh, that's a bad shot. I'll never swear. I'll never make something uncomfortable for anybody else going to the game. They paid money too, right? So just keep it together, people, right? All you fans that travel to different arenas, remember that you're going to someone else's house, the home team's house, so you can cheer. There's nothing wrong with cheering. There's nothing wrong with booing. There is something wrong with acting a different way than you would act in the middle of public, right? You wouldn't walk down Fifth Avenue swearing up a storm because at some point people would start avoiding you. Don't do it just because you're wearing a jersey for a team. Anyways, so that was my experience. And also, just to wrap up again, because I know I'm going a little bit long on this, but I feel like I need to kind of exercise whatever that feeling was from those Rangers fans that were a little bit ridiculous, right? And again, I'm not calling anybody a name or whatever. This is my disclaimer. I just feel like it was like, it's a little bit like, okay, shut up after about 60 minutes, right? When I went to the Nationals game, and this last Friday night, and again, the Nationals have won a championship in 2019. The Nationals are not DC is not a baseball town, right? I mean, people will say historically, baseball's always been in DC. The Senators in the 1960s. Okay, no one remembers that, right? When the Expos folded and when they went to DC, it took a long time for baseball to catch on, and that area of Navy Yard where the Nationals play grew and grew and grew, and it's now a really nice place to see a game, right? There's restaurants and great stuff, and it's become a baseball city, but it's always been hockey first, then baseball. I mean, hockey, probably football, then basketball, then baseball. Now baseball's moving up the charts, right? I can't imagine anyone puts the Wizards above the Nationals. But anyways, slowly but surely, it's become more of like a place to go get a drink, have a fun time. It's like a family-friendly ballpark, that ballpark. They've done a really good job making that feel nice inside. So I was sitting next to Blue Jays fans when I went to go see the game yesterday, and there were Nationals fans all getting along honky-dory. Now, you can say that the Blue Jays maybe don't have like that passionate of a fan base. I would probably say, I don't know, have you gone to Toronto? right? But everybody got along. It was such a different experience. And no one was acting like, a child, essentially. People were booing, people were whooping and hollering and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, everyone got back. It was a nice environment. It felt good. I wanted to go back to those same seats, that same thing. Maybe this changes when the Yankees come to town or when Philly comes to town, or who are the Nationals even rivals at this point? I don't even know. Baltimore, right? And now that Baltimore has a good team, maybe that rivalry gets more intense. But I would guarantee you that it's probably not going to get to the point where after an hour I was sitting there getting pelted by people just yelling obscenities and garbage all over the place. That hasn't happened to me at Nats Park in a long time. So everybody remember, nothing happens if these teams win. And those people that act like, hooligans at these games, just remember, nothing happens if they win. Your life doesn't change. Nothing happens. In 2004, I was living in Boston, and after 86 years, the Red Sox broke the curse, and they won the World Series. And people said, when the Red Sox win, Boston will never be the same. And then they won. And in a shocking way, nothing changed in Boston. So just take that to the bank. The next day, after they won the World Series, on WEEI, people were complaining that the Red Sox weren't good enough. So just remember that when you're whooping and hollering and swearing in the stands. So anyway, let's move on to something more happy because I don't want to talk about these stupid fans anymore. I just wanted to get something off my chest. When we come back, we're going to be talking about rooting for laundry and Jerry Seinfeld. We're going to be talking about his new movie, Unfrosted, coming out on Netflix, which is exactly the type of cleansing feeling that we need. Something that's happy, something that's fun to talk about. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about Jerry Seinfeld's new movie, Unfrosted. What a delight it was to watch that film. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Powell Not Found podcast. Go ahead and help me grow the show. What am I talking about? I can't even speak this morning, and I have a podcast. Go ahead and help grow the show by subscribing to us on youtube.com @PowellNotFound. And go ahead and look at our social profiles. We're on Instagram. We're on TikTok. And go ahead and go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review. So every single review that is good, 5 stars and above, and all that engagement basically helps grow the show. So if you guys can help me out with that and, give me a little bit of support, that'd be great. We're growing a little bit on YouTube. We're growing a little bit on week to week on the podcast front on Apple Podcasts. So thank you for your existing help. If you have any questions or topics you want to discuss on the show, you can email them at powellnotfound@gmail.com. And let's go on to our next topic, which is something that was such a fun way to watch a movie, and that's Jerry Seinfeld's Unfrosted, which just debuted on Netflix. I had heard that this movie was getting kind of like divided reviews, and I imagine you could say that pretty much for every film that ever gets released, right? There's going to be some people that love it, there's going to be some people that hate it, whatever. And this was slicing the critics basically across the board. And I'm here to tell you that this is, if you're looking for camp, if you're looking for comedy that is just plain fun, it's not going to have a lot of substance, and you want to break from let's face it, TV's onslaught of like heavily dramatic plot. I mean, this is it. It's a who's who of comedy. I know that's a cliche, but it's pretty much all of Jerry Seinfeld's comrades and friends and together making a movie, right? You have Jim Gaffigan, you have Max Greenfield, you have Amy Schumer, you have Bill Burr. I mean, in this film, there's so many people that if you know comedy, Melissa McCarthy, if you know comedy, you just know that this is going to be fun. James Marsden. I mean, like, who else? I mean, there's all this stuff. The plot of the movie is basically this space war, space race, rather, a fake space race between Kellogg's and company and the Post company in 1963, right? And it goes through them trying to invent what eventually becomes the Pop Tart, and it is a parody of several different movies. I mean, there are Godfather sequences in this. There's a little bit of Beatlemania at the end. There is some Oppenheimer that it looks like they straight ripped a scene from Oppenheimer last year and put it in here. These characters are surprisingly like shallow and deep at the same time. I can't even explain it. It's just like you get invested so quickly, and I think the pace of it is perfect. It is so fast. It's like a joke every 6 minutes. Or really not every 6 minutes, or every 6 seconds rather. It is one of the it's almost built like a stand-up special. I mean, it's just like goes, and it's just it doesn't let you breathe for a second before the next ridiculous moment happens, which is what makes this so appealing to watch, right? I feel like the movies in general have not had that many opportunities for great comedies to come about, right? And I don't think the movies is necessarily a place where, especially I'm talking about the theater at this point. This obviously came out in streaming services on Netflix. But there's not many opportunities to sit there and go, you know what? What I want to do, I want to go to the theater and watch a comedy, right? If this thing came out in theaters, I think this would be a very, very successful theatrical release because it would bring people back that I don't think you go to the movies anymore for comedy, right? I think you're constantly presented with like the same type of Seth Rogen-esque raunchy comedy that you're not sure whether you're going to walk out feeling good and feeling, happy. You don't have to worry about any of this in this. It's not like shocking comedy. It is just straight like funny. Straight like these are just jokes. Like we know some of them are going to be a little bit over the top. We know they're going to be campy, and they just really play into it and they make it ridiculous, and they keep on one-upping themselves the entire plot. So by the end, when Jerry, when his character is in a fight with the milkmen of the 1960s, and they're also talking about, with Kennedy, about releasing sugar because the Russians are getting involved, you realize that you've just grown to such a level of ridiculousness that it just plays so well. It just plays so well. It's a nice, funny comedy. It just keeps on one-upping itself. It reminds me of just being in improv when you would be in a scene and you need to take it to a new level, right? There's a form in improv called Herald, which is taught pretty much. It used to be taught by the UCB. It was taught by the Improv Olympic when that was still in existence, and that was the style that Seinfeld was based after, right? Or what they claimed Seinfeld was based after was this form called the Herald, where you start off with establishing scenes, and then there's a little bit of a game in the middle, kind of an abstract game, and then the scenes start to intertwine in the second sequence, and then everyone is together in one big group scene because you've established all these characters. It kind of works like that. Like you're establishing these characters, and eventually everyone's kind of coming to this big moment at the end, and you're one-upping, right? And you're trying to make it more ridiculous, or you're trying to get the extra tag. It kind of has that flow to it. And so this is really deeply analyzing something that probably shouldn't be deeply analyzed, but it's a great movie. It's honestly, it was the quickest like 2 hours of watching a movie on Netflix that I've ever had. Like, it was just an enjoyment to watch. Jim Gaffigan does a really good job being essentially Jim Gaffigan's ridiculous character. Hugh Grant, who plays this jaded mascot who essentially leads like I'm assuming that it's a play off of what happened on January 6th, like this kind of raid on the building kind of thing. And it plays it perfectly, right? Plays a jaded, who is that mascot called? Tony the Tiger, who basically leads a raid against Kellogg. It's a funny, clever, absolutely ridiculous concept. There are moments that are just throwaways, like during Tony the Tiger's raid, there's a ketchup and a fry that go through an emotional moment. All happens in 6 seconds, and then they're out. It never comes back again. There's a ridiculous elements of these characters that we've seen for ages on the Quaker Oats box, like you just saw, come to life and just have these ridiculous characters, but they're playing it all so straight that it's like that you really buy into the reality of this world, and it's goofy as hell. And I feel like anybody else executing this, it probably wouldn't work as well, but something about the fact that everyone is so bought in, and it's not like the greatest like acted thing in the world, but it's just so well put together and well crafted that it just makes it an enjoyable watch. So whatever the reviews say, I give this thing a positive review. This is one of the better comedies I've seen lately. I love how campy it is. It just reminds me of it reminds me of Conan a little bit, like Conan O'Brien. Like I was discussing to somebody the other day that watching Conan O'Brien and seeing Conan come back, right? That you miss this element of goofiness that used to exist on television that you don't see anymore, right? Like Jimmy Fallon's like playing games with people. Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert, they have like a little bit of a political twinge, right? But Conan always kind of represented the goofiness of late night, and that there was always this element of like, it didn't matter. It wasn't really pertaining to the world. It didn't need to exist, yet it does exist. And there was something relaxing and enjoyable about watching that type of comedy. This is the same thing. If I told you a couple months ago that one of my favorite movies would be about a space race with Kellogg's cereal and Post cereal, I don't know. I'd probably ask to be hospitalized. I don't know what I'd be talking about. But this is something that needed to exist. I think this is such a beautiful thing to kind of come out now. It's a very, very enjoyable summer movie. I couldn't highly recommend it. I couldn't recommend it enough. So go watch Unfrosted. It's a funny comedy from Jerry Seinfeld. There's a Instagram ad about Kellogg's, talking about they didn't give any rights for him to do this. I'm really intrigued about how he got permission to do this, or whether he got permission at all to do this. There's a little bit of a video online of Kellogg's basically joking that he didn't get any permission to do it. If he didn't, that'd be funny. But usually you would assume that these big companies would be very protective of their brand, and they would want to know. And you'd think that if they're talking about Kellogg's or whatever, they'd want to know exactly what he's going to say, what the movie was. They want to play it safe. There's something about this film that makes me think that no one saw it before it was made, and maybe they just greenlighted it because it was so good, or maybe there's no permission given at all. I'm really intrigued to see how this thing came about, because I feel like there are so many opportunities for a big company to be protective of its brand and say no, or wreck the script or rewrite the script so it makes them look better. Like even Post, right? I mean, Post cereal, right, could being enacted as a villain in this thing, a goofy villain. They must have greenlighted it, right? So maybe they saw the name Jerry Seinfeld and said, well, how can we say no, right? It's going to be good. So So this would be almost stupid to not give him creative liberty on this. So I'm intrigued to kind of go behind the scenes of this movie and see how it was made and how they kind of came to the idea. And to see if there was like rewrites and if they came to the table with this idea and how much it changed. Because I feel like comedy goes through those rewrites and everyone brings writers and it gets worse and worse and worse. And an original idea could be great, but by the time it actually hits post-production, it's a shell of what it used to be. So I'm really intrigued to see the behind the scenes of this movie and what it was like. But anyway, Unfrosted on Netflix. Jerry Seinfeld's new movie about Pop Tarts is out now. Go check it out and tell me what you think. Leave a comment about what you think the movie was like or what your feelings were towards the movie. Because if this was truly divisive, I want to know what those people, the people who are negative about it, want to see from a comedy. Because this is exactly what you want. You want just like fun, goofiness on screen. What else could you want, right? It's like kind of like it's not provocative, right, by any stretch of the means. It's just funny. That's what you want from a movie. And if they didn't like it, you know what? Lighten up, you know? Anyways, let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll talk about Aaron Judge's ejection. Yes, you heard me right. It's an ejection, his first in his career. And we'll talk about some funky baseball plays as well as some new City Connect jerseys coming up next on the Powell Not Found podcast. Then we'll wrap up the show because we're getting a little long. This week. So, all right. See you soon. Hey, everybody, and welcome back. Welcome back to the show. Let's talk some weird baseball plays happening this week. The Pete Alonso and the Mets is the first up that I want to talk about here. Let me make sure this is up, and let me make sure this is widescreen. Everybody remember, leave a comment, leave a review. Any engagement drives the show and grows the show. So if you can help me out there, that would be great. Yeah, some weird baseball plays. Let me actually push to the new play. Let me fade down that music here. So weird play happening in the Chicago Cubs-Mets game this last week where Pete Alonso was thrown out at the plate. A lot of changes have happened to Major League Baseball to make player safety first. Right. I mean, and player safety has always been a concern going back to the introduction of the helmet. But they've really done a better job trying to. The Players Association, along with MLB, have really done a good job to try to make sure that player safety is paramount because you're seeing a lot of people injured. Not to mention our whole episode, 3 episodes ago, that we talked about pitcher injury, right, being huge, elbow injuries being rampant, right? People are dropping like flies. And one of the plays that changes were made to was like even the width of first base was made bigger because people were colliding into a home plate, sliding into second when people used to take people out like freight trains, right? We played that clip with Willie Randolph and the Royals. Just I think it was McGee, right? Just completely throwing him into left field, right? That play does not exist anymore because what's the point, right? If you're breaking up a double play, you can break up a double play, but is it at the risk of ruining someone's career, right? And one of the bigger ones that was removed from baseball, which a lot of people disagree with, was Buster Posey when he got hurt with the Giants because he was run into at home plate and he was knocked out for a year and maybe was never the same, right? And so immediately Major League Baseball changed that rule, and it's been tinkered with for years now, right? And they have since instituted the rule that if a catcher cannot block the plate until, and let me actually fade back to me here before we actually play this clip, until he has possession of the ball, so he cannot block the lane. So a lot of catchers now have been basically stepping in front of the plate, waiting for the ball to come, and then going for the tag, right? This opens up the runner's lane. It doesn't make them sitting ducks as they were, because people would come in and try to run them over. In fact, even when I was playing ball when I was younger, right, I remember gearing myself up to have one of those plays in Little League, and I just completely botched it. I remember coming down the third base line, running. I was ready to barrel into the catcher, right, because that was part of the game at the time. And I tripped over my feet, and I think I just fell flat on the ground. Catcher tagged me out about 10 feet from the home plate. Served me right, though, for trying to do one of those plays, right? Like the universe stopped me in that case, right? So again, we have this controversial call that happened in the Cubs-Mets game, and let's play it out here, and you can kind of see why it's controversial. So ball goes out to the left fielder. Left fielder camped underneath it. Here comes the throw to the plate. Cutoff man delivers to the catcher, and boom, he's out at the plate. Now that's pretty standard textbook until you start seeing where the catcher was, and hopefully they'll shoot to it soon. And this is courtesy of ESPN MLB. So catcher, all right on top of the plate here. I mean, this is against the rules. Pete Alonso is probably safe. His arm kind of comes up a little bit, and maybe he doesn't he goes over the plate, but he doesn't actually touch touch home plate. But you can clearly see that he's blocking the plate. They went to review, stepping right on it. I mean, he does not have ownership of the ball. Stepping right on the plate, clearly blocking. He should have been ruled safe. They went to review. Review came back and said, no, he's out. Now, it's unclear about whether he touched home plate, I guess, is maybe what they're upholding the call for. But if they really want to institute the rule, they've got to reverse that call. I mean, he is safe according to the rules that you've instituted. And what's the point? And I think a lot of people have mentioned this and already beat this to a pulp at this point. But like, what's the point about having the rule or going to replay if you're going to continuously have plays be wrong still? Right? That doesn't make sense. Like, he's out, he's safe, right? So, kind of a confusing little play there. And probably one that I think at the end of the season they may have to revisit and going, is this a botched call, right? Like, maybe there should be more time. Who made that call, right? Like what's the point of replay? Like, if you're still going to have the human element there, what is the point of going to replay and challenging that call? And then also, can we have more insight after the game about why they decided to call it that way? Because I think that they need more additional information to kind of disseminate going, can we have more than a yes or no, he's out or safe, from the people analyzing it? Because it might make a little bit more sense if there's something else in play, right? I'm sure the managers get that detail. I think we need to get that detail, right? Plus, it would make it more interesting, right? If you could hear them disseminate, that would be kind of cool. They constantly shoot to whatever New York is, but hearing New York debate, that would be kind of a cool little addition to the game, because that would get you right in there, right? You wouldn't have to speculate anymore about what their decision making is, right? If they had a mic up there and you can hear them discuss the call. Would they do that? Probably not. Moving on a little bit to another game here. We have the Cubs-Mets game again. Like, this series was full of just bizarre incidences, right? Like, so we have Pete Crow Armstrong hitting an RBI double, and he uses his helmet to stay on the base. That's according to the caption here on MLB.com. Let me actually push this full screen here so you can actually see the play, and you tell me whether this seems legal. Double right down the line. What a nice little piece of hitting in Citi Field. Comes on, he overslides the bag, and he takes off his helmet, overslides the bag, but he's touching the bag with his helmet, and touching the bag with his helmet, and he is ruled safe. Now, in my mind, if you're doing that, like, why wouldn't you just run with the bat at that point? You know what I mean? If everything that's attached to you is considered part of you as a runner, why wouldn't you just take the bat with you, right? Try to slam first base before you run if everything's a part of you. I think it's bad enough, too, that they give the runners the ability to put on a oven mitt and slide and make their extension a little bit quicker, right? Again, all in the name of player safety, so you can't really knock it because you don't want people breaking fingers like Aaron Judge did in the playoffs that one year. But at the same time, the helmet, I mean, that seems very strategic. It's not something that seems like it would be legal in any other let me play this. In any other context, right? Like, if he was running out there with a pole vault and he hits second base, is he considered safe? It just seems a little bit weird. It seems like a doctoring of the rules. It seems like something that they were thinking about that maybe in future games this is going to be clarified. It's like, you can't do that. Like that's a nice nifty play, but just like that Nestor throw, that when Nestor kind of faked through it to the batter and then threw the ball. I mean, it's still deceiving the hitter. And then they ruled after the fact that was not legal in the first place. So just some bizarre things happening in the Mets game, and you would expect no less from the Mets that they would have two crazy incidences happen. But Major League Baseball has to kind of get a little bit more strict here, kind of enforcing the rules and doing what they can. Before we get to the last baseball thing, because I do want to wrap up, because I know I'm just kind of listing things that I'm like, oh, wait, we should talk about this. Tampa Bay and the Mets. And then I want to talk about Aaron Judge's ejection, just for a quick second, talking about following the rules. Tampa Bay has released their City Connect jerseys, and this is all kind of in the midst of a lot of uniform news. I know we talk about all of the jerseys way too often on this show because that has been the source of contention throughout most of Major League Baseball this year about how the jerseys are horrible, right? They're sweaty, they're gross looking. Not only the designs seem cheap, the uniforms seem cheap, the pants are see-through. They just don't look like a normal big league uniform. The letters are small in the back. Well, they've decided to go and change that. They got word that Nike is going to go back to the big lettering starting in 2025. So they're going to have these jerseys for the rest of the season. They're going to work on trying to manufacture jerseys that are better and changing the. I guess they didn't confirm that they're going to change the fabric at all, but they're going to work on the sweating problem. I mean, one person can look at Carlos Rodon during one start. I mean, by the second inning, he looks like he basically walked out of a pool, right? So there is that kind of good improvement that they're bringing to these uniforms because it needed to happen, right? In the midst of all this happening, which is, hey, a great win for baseball, the Rays, and this is from today.com, the Rays debuted their new City Connect jerseys. I don't know if you can see this, but they get Manfred out of the corner here. They debuted their new uniforms, which going with another black kind of color scheme. It looks a little bit minor league in design and style, but I guess that's the point with these City Connect things. They're supposed to be a little bit of an homage to where you play and have a little bit of a cooler design, a little bit more festive thing. I mean, this whole thing is to really sell jerseys. These ones aren't the worst. I think the hat is probably the coolest part about this, but the jersey itself is very neon, kind of mixing in that old Devil Rays kind of look that they had for a long time, for about 10 years before they went to the kind of blue-white schema. Not the worst design in the world, but just something very similar. I mean, we've seen the full black jerseys we've seen from baseball teams like the Chicago White Sox, who have full blacks. We have the Baltimore Orioles, which have a very, very sparse design that's full black uniforms. And so this is another one of the cavalcade of those ones. This has also been followed up by the Mets. There's 4 other teams, I think, this year that are going to have City Connect jerseys, and I think the only 2 teams that don't have one on tap is the Yankees, of course, and I think people knew that the Yankees were going to be very, very conservative before releasing a jersey, and the Oakland A's, and which kind of tracks a little bit because Oakland doesn't know where they're going to be, so it's hard to have a City Connect if you don't even have a city. So the other one I wanted to mention was 2 weeks ago, the Mets revealed their uniforms, and the hat, has the bridge on it, the Brooklyn Bridge on it. I think that's is the Brooklyn or is the Queensboro? I think it's the Queensboro Bridge. Sorry, the Queensboro Bridge on it. They are a little Jailhouse Rocky, kind of in style with the black pinstripes, the NYC on the corner. And the purple schema, which is the combination of blue and orange, which, by the way, if you didn't know, the reason the Mets wear blue and orange, right, is because when the Brooklyn Dodgers, blue, and the Giants, the New York Giants, orange, left town, when the Mets were created, they were supposed to be an homage to both of those teams, right? So that's why the Mets have this blue-orange schema to represent the old historical New York teams that are now playing in San Francisco and LA. So the combination of that is purple, so you kind of get where they're going with that. They're interesting, but all of them kind of feel minor league in design. And I don't know whether I'm saying that as like an older baseball fan going, I don't know about these. These seem like a little bit of a stretch. There was a uniform, I think the Cleveland Indians had a uniform where the names were vertical at one point in the back. So this isn't the first time Major League Baseball has experimented with their uniforms. I don't know if these jerseys will sell. I mean, they probably will. I mean, who knows? I don't know that much about how much money these things are making, but it doesn't seem like I like the Washington ones. I thought they were clever. One of these weeks, maybe next week, I'll go through a ranking of all of them just so we can see, because there are some that work and some that just don't. I mean, Washington, I think, is really, really good. I was first kind of a little bit like, I don't know about this. I like the color schema. I think it's clever. I think it's something that you haven't seen before. I like the connection to the cherry blossoms. San Diego, good God, no. I mean, it looks like a clown, a circus just designed a uniform. It's the worst. If you ever get a chance, look up City Connect San Diego uniforms and tell me that that's a good uniform. Maybe next week we'll do a ranking of them, because I feel like there's a lot now and there's only going to be more. And maybe we can do this as a running scheme, because some are just better than others. And these ones are not. The Mets, the Rays, uninspired. Let's put it that way. That's how I want to kind of categorize them. Last but not least, let's get out of here with a little bit less than an hour to go. Aaron Judge was ejected for the first time in his career. I guess it's the first time that a Yankee captain has been ejected since Don Mattingly in 1994. Derek Jeter was historically, I don't think, ever ejected from a game, which kind of tracks. But it was kind of shocking to see Aaron Judge complain this vociferously. Obviously, as a competitor, he was very, very mum after the fact. Most of the Yankees were pretty mum about the ejection, about what it was. The Yankees have always kind of had this now love-hate relationship with the umps ever since Aaron Boone took over. Joe Girardi was kind of, also very passionate. I just don't feel like it happened as frequently as like Aaron Boone getting ejected. You can almost count on like once every 10 days you're going to have an Aaron Boone ejection, to the point where I think Aaron Boone even said MLB told him to calm it down. I think he said that, but don't quote me on that. So here it is, Aaron Boone getting a called strike 3 on a basically pitch that is a strike. I mean, he doesn't really have a case here, and maybe that's why he's kind of mum after the game, not to mention the fact that MLB will probably fine him for an ejection. I don't know what the protocol is for an ejection, but I imagine there's a fine, right, for getting thrown out. There's got to be some sort of consequence, right? So let's check it out. So we got a pitch from Holton, and it dots that corner. I mean, and complains, goes back to the ump, basically says, you've been BSing me all game. And while he's walking away, he gets tossed, and you don't often see Aaron Judge like this. But maybe you see Aaron Judge like that because my man is hitting like 209 or something, or 208. He's starting to kind of heat up, but he's got like 3 hits in the last like 5 games. Something's wrong with him. Something's not clicking with him. And I think after about 32 games, you say, well, that's a pretty good sample size. You should be able to kind of get it going, but he hasn't. And I think that frustration is starting to kind of melt over finally. And when you've been through a stretch in your career that you've, quite frankly, have never experienced, you're going to be frustrated, right? You're going to take it out on some people. That was a good pitch. As a Yankees fan, I feel like there are other calls that are going to be probably ones that you want to complain about a little bit more than that pitch. Aaron Judge has historically been called pitches that are like at his shins strikes because they don't adjust the strike zone. This has also stimulated a lot of talk about the automated balls and strikes system, the ABS, which terribly needs a rebrand because it sounds too much like IBS. The automated balls and strikes system in the minor leagues, the challenge system, I don't really want to see that. I think it sounds good to get every call right, but it's already long enough when they challenge each play and you see the cameras dart to the dugout to see whether they're going to challenge a close play at first. Yes, the game has gotten quicker. That doesn't give us liberty to make it longer by increasing the amount of challenges. So before they bring it up, they have to make sure this is like 1 or 2 a game so it doesn't bog down the game. I'm afraid that with every pitch, if they get it right or if they get it wrong, because the automated balls and strike zone is so exact that we could be taking a 2.5-hour game, which is pretty quick and swift now, and making it again a 3.5-hour game, which is going to defeat the purpose. And once you let the cat out of the bag, you can't exactly take it back. Look what they did with the Ghost Runner, right? I mean, it works so well that eventually they're like, let's leave it in the season. They don't do it in the postseason yet, but maybe it's hard to kind of put that back. They did it with 7-inning ball games and double headers, which I'm glad they did because that was kind of like a little bit of a, what are we doing this for, right? Like, are we all trying to go home early? But yeah, I'm very, very hesitant to endorse or say bring it on just because somebody didn't get a called strike that was right on the plate. I mean, hitters are entirely too selective. I know they're trying to work a walk, but part of hitting is also swinging the bat and protecting the plate. And sorry, Judge, you struck out. That was a good call. So hit the plate, or at least hit close enough that you got a hack at that pitch. So anyways, with that said, I'm going to wrap up the show. Again, just reminding everybody to go ahead and subscribe to the show on YouTube, subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, and we'll see you next week with more baseball news, with more movie news. Go see Unfrosted. Also, don't be a fan that's unruly and starting fights in a stadium. I think I made myself clear in the first 20 minutes of the show, but just as a reminder, be a good person, have a good week, and I'll see you next week.
Her birthday was getting corona.